For a while I wanted to build a lab power supply, which is a pretty easy thing to do. Basically you've got 1, 2, 3 voltage rails, 12, 5 and 3.3 volts, USB rail, that sort of thing. This is an old 400 watt power supply out of an old ATX computer. I do have a proper lab bench top power supply there, but this was just a bit of a project. And out of the PC that it came from, I found this old IDE hard drive. Now, the previous owner, because it was a council throwout, he thought he'd take it on himself to try and render it unusable by smashing all the pins. It's pretty ancient. It's 40 gigabytes, 7200 RPM. It probably does have a build date on here. There we go, 05497. So it's pretty ancient. 1997. Yes, we still had computers back then, kids. So this old IDE connector, I'm going to straighten all these pins. I've tried to straighten the pins for the power supply, the ATX power supply there. I'm going to see if I can plug this into an old computer and see what's on there. So tools of the trade are pretty straightforward here. I've just used a little flat blade screwdriver to bend the pins that are really quite badly damaged. Of course, if you work hard on these, they'll snap off, so you've got to be a bit careful. And all I'm doing is using a set of needle nose pliers and just successively, just with Mark 1 eyeball, bending and straightening each pin just so that they look like they would accept an old IDE connector. Now, IDE is the predecessor of SATA, serial ATA. So we'll give this a bit of a go, and once they're all straight, I'll find an old PC. I think I've got one in the roof that runs Windows 2000, and I should be able to plug this in, set it up as a slave drive, and whatever data is on there, I'll be able to read all of it. And because it was pre sort of Windows 7, Windows 10, the user files are not locked the way that they are on Windows 10 operating systems. So if you find that if you build a second operating system on a C drive and swap it out, and say you're putting in a new SSD, you'll find that you can't access the old C users directory because Windows knows that there's probably data in there and it won't let you access them. Anyway, for kids that were born before the Stone Age, you may recognise this. This is an IDE connector. So basically you can see there's a locating slot there, and that little locating pin has to fit inside there. So if you gently work this in and line the pins up, we should have a working hard drive, or an accessible hard drive. The only thing you've got to check, of course, is these jumper pins, which on SATA is not relevant, but what you'll see is it tells you how it's set up. So this is set up for cable select, so that's got the jumper on it for cable select. If all goes to plan, that should just line up, and in she goes. So now we've got a cabled connector. All I need is 12 volts and 5 volts to these. These pins are a little bit sloppy because they were bent by the previous owner, but shouldn't be too hard. This is an fairly ancient AMD 3500 Athlon processor. So I've got a couple of old drives in here. I've unplugged the optical drive so that I can use both the IDE and the old IDE pin connector. Yellow is 12 volts, red is 5 volts, black of course is ground. So just jumping into BIOS here. Okay, so that's the boot drive with an operating system. That's the ST3400, the 40 gig drive that I repaired, so or bent the pins back so that I could see what it was. So that's on channel 1 master. So yeah, it's detecting that as 40 gig. I've managed to get this one working, booting from an old 160 gig version of Windows 2000 Service Pack 4. So there's the drive hanging off there in the breeze. So if I go into the drive, documents and settings, games, piggyback, Circus, free games, okay, games, Golden Dragon, Safari slots, documents and settings. So I don't know what this guy was trying to hide, but it was nothing interesting. So he's used 3.3 gig out of 40 gig. So basically it was a bit of a waste of time doing this because there was nothing interesting on there. absolutely nothing. So anyway, shut it down.